You saw her fingers on the wine glass, not holding, not letting go. The rim kissed her lip like a blade. She smiled, and you mistook it for warmth. But you forgot the truth. No woman wants safety, only the illusion of it, laced with the thrill of collapse. You gave her order, she drowned. You gave her madness, she disappeared. She lives at the edge, not the edge of cliffs, but the edge of men's minds, where obedience is boring, but domination is grotesque, where she tests how far you'll bend before you break, just to feel real. She'll start a fire, then ask why the house is burning. She'll beg for mercy, then sharpen the knife. And you will call it love, you will call it fate, you will call it your fault. But the ancient hunger behind her smile is older than guilt, older than romance. It is the will to balance herself on your ruin. If this whisper already knows, you let it echo. Like the video. Leave your shadow in the comments. Subscribe, and stay near the silence. Every boundary you give her becomes a mirror not of you, but of how far she can bend the bars without breaking the illusion. You thought the rules would make her stay. You offered her structure like a crown, routines, promises, and the kind of safety that smells like dust. You believed she needed clarity, but she was only watching, measuring, silently asking, how strong is the man who believes in walls? She won't push back with defiance. That's too obvious. Instead, she drapes herself in the boundaries you draw and walks them like a tightrope, one heel over the other, never falling, never holding your hand. You don't notice it at first, the questions that circle but never land, the smiles that slip past your logic, the way she obeys and disobeys at the same time. She doesn't want to escape. She wants to test not just you, but the mythology you wear. Every rule is a stage. Every line you draw is an invitation for her to lean close and whisper. Is that all? She doesn't crave rebellion. She craves the echo inside your restraint. The silence after you say no. The heat in your jaw when you try not to flinch. The tension that proves something still breathes underneath your control. You will say she's unpredictable, but that's not true. She's surgical. She presses on the weakest beam in your architecture, never to collapse it, but to feel its tension hum like a violin string under her touch. The moment you feel yourself tightening, restraining, counting to 10, she's already winning. Not because she wants power, but because your discomfort confirms that you believed the structure was enough. She never believed it, not even for a second. The men who love control always attract women who haunt the edges of it. You build the fortress. She stains the curtains with perfume and leaves the door open a crack. She doesn't want to escape. She wants to feel the cold draft on her skin and ask you why you're always checking the lock. This is not a game to her. It's older than that. It's the instinct of the feminine not to destroy order, but to challenge its illusion. Because she knows what you pretend not to, that the boundaries you build are not truth. They're fear of chaos, of the abyss, of yourself. And she must taste that fear to believe you're real. You offer her loyalty. She offers you contradiction. You offer her clarity. She offers you a fog that smells like lavender and blood. You give her your definition of love, something sacred, noble, fixed. She holds it like a glass of wine, then tilts it just enough to spill and asks why you didn't prepare for the stain. She doesn't want to be tamed, but she doesn't want to lead. She wants to watch. She wants to see how your spine shifts when the air changes. She wants to know how much of your masculinity is costume and how much is bone. If you scream when she twists, you were never a king. If you punish her for dancing around the rules you were never worth following, you'll call her manipulative, dramatic, impossible. But those are the names men give to women they don't understand. And she does not want to be understood, she wants to be reflected. That is what the cage is for. Not to trap her, but to become a mirror. Do you know what it means when she tests your limits? It means she still believes you have them. She still believes there is something sacred under the armor, something primal, volatile, divine. She presses because she wants you to press back, not with violence, but with presence, with clarity, with the kind of gaze that sees through the fog and says, "I see you, and I do not tremble." That is the cage she dares you to lock, not to imprison her, but to prove it's you, not the structure, who holds the key. But you misunderstand. You give her rules and expect gratitude. You give her certainty and call it devotion. You set boundaries like fences around a garden, thinking it will bloom from obedience. But she is not a flower. She is the firelight in the forest. She is not meant to grow. She is meant to burn and ask what you'll build from the ash. You think boundaries protect love, but she knows love lives in the collapse in the eyes that don't flinch when the world tilts sideways, in the hands that grip even when the frame cracks. She doesn't want your control, she wants your truth, and she knows your truth only emerges when control begins to fail. So she leans closer, not to betray you, but to strip away what you never questioned. She wants to see what you become when your peace is threatened. If your masculinity survives without applause, if your certainty remains when she turns the lights off and disappears for 3 days and returns without explanation. Not because she's cruel, because she wants to know if you know who you are. You call it chaos, but she calls it reflection. The cage was never about rules. It was about mirror and myth, about how much illusion you need to feel real, and how much you're willing to risk to step into the unknown with her. If you flinch, she knows the cage was not for her. It was for your fear. And once she knows that, she cannot stay. Because she will never respect the man who builds a prison and forgets he's inside it. 2. You think she left because you weren't enough. But no. She left because you gave her everything except a reason to stay curious. She touched every bar of your cage, and they never moved. You mistook her stillness for contentment, but stillness to her is starvation. You didn't lose her to a stronger man. You lost her to the man who dared let her walk, knowing she might never return, but whose eyes told her, "I remain." And in that flicker of presence, there is the only kind of dominance she will ever trust. Not control, not fear, but the cage of a man who needs no cage. What draws her is not love, but the trembling between chaos and control, a dance that demands both danger and design. She will never ask for chaos outright. That would be too honest. Instead, she asks for meaning, for passion, for something that feels like fate, but stings like a warning. And you trained by comfort. Trained by reward, offer her stability. She thanks you with a kiss and a long silence. You don't notice that the fire in her breath is cooling. You only feel the comfort, and so you mistake her stillness for peace, when it is actually the beginning of the end. She is a flame, yes, but not the kind that flickers gently in lanterns. She is the kind that leaps, that searches, that consumes not to destroy, but to reveal what cannot be hidden. The moment you try to contain her, the fire doesn't disappear, it turns inward. Smiles sharpen, eyes lose their hunger. And one morning, you wake next to her, and she is already gone. Though her body remains in bed, she has begun dreaming of a world that still has wind. You ask yourself what went wrong, but you never ask why she looked bored when you were kind, why she only leaned in when you spoke with danger in your voice, why her eyes widened not at your compliments, but at your certainty, the rare moments when you spoke without permission. She was never drawn to your gentleness. She was drawn to the edge in you that scared even yourself. Because love, to her, is not soft. It is sharp. It is a trembling, a dance between two forces that cannot fully tame each other, only orbit, threaten, and return. She doesn't want your comfort. She wants your conflict, the kind that doesn't explode, but burns quietly, eternally, behind the ribs. She wants to feel it when you walk into a room, that unspoken thing, that voltage, that refusal to be fully known. Stillness to her is death, not because she's restless, but because she's alive, and life, in its rawest form, moves, not in straight lines, but in tension, in rhythm, in contradiction. She craves that rhythm the way lungs crave air. When you remove the tension, she stops breathing, and so she sets small fires, not to punish you, but to wake herself, to see if your eyes still flash with the danger she once worshipped. She is not cruel, she is vigilant. She tests you not because she distrusts you, but because she cannot trust a man who no longer trembles. Stillness, to her, is what happens to men who have traded vitality for politeness, who offer her a seat in their lives but never a throne in their storm. And she needs the storm. She is the storm. You called it drama. She called it proof. That morning she threw the cup across the room. It wasn't rage. It was a prayer, a desperate attempt to see if you'd feel again, if you'd rise, not in violence, but in presence. If you'd stop smiling, stop apologizing, stop shrinking. She didn't want an answer. She wanted a reaction. And when none came, her fire dropped to embers. Don't flatter yourself with words like stable and safe. She didn't need a father. She needed a man who carried fire in his mouth, the kind that could singe her lashes when he whispered, not out of malice, out of unbearable life. She doesn't want to burn you. She wants to burn with you, to feel that you, too, are alive enough to forget your name in the heat of becoming, that you, too, despise comfort when it has no meaning, that you, too, remember the animal under the architecture. You gave her a house, but she needed a hunt. She does not dream of routine. She dreams of risk, the kind that comes not from recklessness, but from exposure, from being seen in your fullest, the god and the ghost, the predator and the poet. She is not drawn to perfection. She is drawn to the contradiction. The man who can say, I would die for you, and also, I will not bend for you. And most men bend, not out of weakness, out of fear. They call it love, but it is survival. They worship her at the altar of guilt and call it devotion. But she sees through it. She sees the resentment, the teeth behind the kiss, and she knows it will rot. So she tests. She turns the music too loud. She disappears for hours. She tells you stories with too many missing details and watches your eyes for the flicker if you tighten, if you freeze, if you try to win her back with logic, or worse, with submission. But what she's really asking, in the silence between her questions, is this: are you still dangerous? Do you still have something in you that won't kneel, not to her, not to anyone, that core, that trembling, that edge that makes her pulse rise, that tells her the world is still real, still wild, still holy? Because when that edge disappears, she is alone. Not physically, but spiritually. You may still hold her hand, but she feels the absence of war, of play, of something unspeakable beneath the surface, that old electricity between predator and priest, between child and shadow. And when she feels that absence, she must either awaken it or leave. Not because she wants to, because she must. You thought she wanted love. She did not. She wanted ecstasy, the kind that only emerges in the crack between danger and control. You offered her one side of the coin order, loyalty, peace, and expected her to be whole. But the other side was missing the thrill, the chase, the unexpected hand around her throat, not to hurt her, but to remind her that this world still has claws, still has pulse, still has men who breathe smoke and don't apologize for it. You were her temple once because she saw a fire inside. But over time, you replaced the fire with politeness, with compromise, with words that sounded like virtue but felt like retreat. She lit the torches again, one by one, hoping you'd return to the edge. But you stayed in the center safe, smiling, dead, and so she mourned you long before she left. You'll say she wanted too much, that no man could satisfy her hunger. But you're wrong, she didn't want more. She wanted real presence, real danger, real trembling, even if it ends in ruin, because she would rather fall into flame than sleep inside a glass cage called happiness. She will not beg, she will not threaten, she will simply fade back into the storm she was born from, back into the forest of chaos, where things still breathe without names, and men still walk her with fire behind their eyes. And you will tell yourself she was unreasonable, unstable, insatiable, but deep down, you'll remember her silence. The way she looked at you the night before she left, not with anger, but with mourning. Because she didn't leave you for another man. She left because the flame that once lived in your bones had gone still, and she cannot love what no longer burns. She does not resent domination, she resents the man who thinks he owns her, because he mistook her mask for surrender. She let you think she was tame. That was the first test. Not to trick you, but to expose you. Because the man who believes a woman's stillness is surrender reveals more about himself than about her. You thought her softness was submission. You thought her silence meant peace. You thought her beauty was permission to own. But beneath her lowered eyes, she was watching, listening, measuring the architecture of your soul with the quietest kind of violence, the violence of insight. And she saw it, the twitch in your pride when she praised another man, the flinch in your shoulders when she laughed too freely. You wore power like a badge, but it stained your skin like fear. She never needed a ruler, she needed a mirror. And when you crowned yourself as her guide, her keeper, her man without noticing the kingdom in her stare, she began to vanish. Not suddenly, slowly, like a ghost rehearsing her own disappearance. The mask she wore, the one you adored, docile, grateful, gently broken, that mask was never hers. It was a reflection of your need, and she gave it to you freely, not as a gift, but as a blade to see if you'd recognize the lie. You saw her wearing the mask and believed it was her face. You thought love meant possession. You thought keeping her meant shaping her. You called your control guidance. You called your jealousy care. You called your fears boundaries. But she saw it. She saw the boy in the throne, clutching rules to feel like a king, and she waited, because the feminine doesn't destroy directly, it waits for the lie to rot from within. And your lie that she was yours began to stink. She smiled through it, played the part, even offered softness when you least deserved it, not out of love, out of curiosity. How far will he go before he notices I'm already gone? You tried to lead, but you led from fear. Fear of losing her, fear of her mystery, fear of your own inadequacy, buried under layers of instruction and charm. You gave her a manual, not a myth, a framework, not a flame. You saw her magic and tried to schedule it. You took the wild and tried to manage it, and in doing so, you awakened her deepest contempt. She doesn't hate power, she hates pretense. The man who dominates her with presence silently, without force she will follow to hell. But the man who demands her obedience as proof of his worth, he will be unmasked and punished, not with anger, with disappointment. That is the feminine curse she punishes by revealing the truth too late. Not to harm, to awaken. But most men call it betrayal, because they were never listening in the first place. She wore the mask for you because she wanted to see who you were without it. Would you ask what she wanted? Would you see through her disguise? Or would you praise her quiet, praise her softness, and believe the play was real? You praised the performance, and so she rewrote the script. You thought you'd won her, that your certainty, your stability, your rules had brought her home. But she never wanted a home, she wanted recognition. And when you failed to see the queen beneath the costume, she withdrew the kingdom. This is how the punishment begins, not with rebellion, but with distance. She still answers your questions, but her voice is hollow. She still kisses you, but her lips are colder. She still smiles when your friends visit, but her eyes are not watching them. They're watching you, wondering if you'll finally break the spell. And you don't. You buy flowers, you plan dinners, you talk about the future, you do everything a good man is supposed to do. But goodness is not what she craves. She craves presence, depth, power that doesn't speak because it doesn't need to. But you keep talking, explaining, rationalizing. And every word you speak in defense of your own strength is another stone placed between her and the man she hoped you were. Do you understand the betrayal? Not that you failed her, but that you thought you owned her, that you mistook her compliance for devotion, that you wore the mask of the provider and forgot she was not looking to be provided for, she was looking to be seen. And now, the mask is gone. She doesn't yell, she doesn't argue, she simply stops needing you, and that, to a man like you, is the deepest humiliation. Because you believed your love was enough. You believed your control was care. You believed that if she stayed close, she must still belong to you. But no woman truly belongs. Not the kind who wears masks. Not the kind who tests cages. She belongs only to the man who can hold her with open hands and still command the storm. You asked for loyalty, but you asked too soon. You hadn't earned her chaos yet. You hadn't faced her fire and stood still. You hadn't let her destroy your ego just to see what remained. You tried to skip the storm and live in the harvest, but the harvest only comes after the flood, and she is the flood. She doesn't want to win. She wants to be met. She wants to shatter the mirror and see if you still recognize her without reflection. She wants to offer you power, not as a reward, but as a test to see if you can hold it without grasping, without naming, without owning. And you failed. You mistook her mask for consent. You mistook her patience for love. You mistook her dance around your rules as a plea to be caged. And now, she walks freely, not away but beyond, because the mask has fallen, and you never looked behind it. You will try to bring her back. You will apologize. You will offer change, but she doesn't need your apologies. She needs your depth. And if she didn't find it in your eyes before, she will not search there again. She will not punish you with words. She will punish you with absence, with silence, with the hollow space that once held her flame. And that emptiness will echo, not because she was everything, but because you were not enough to meet her without needing to tame her. That is the final paradox. She is drawn to strength, but will destroy the man who flaunts it. She is drawn to power, but will ghost the man who hoards it. She is drawn to presence, but will disappear from the man who confuses control with truth. You never lost her, you never met her, you met the mask, and when the mask came off, you blinked, and when you blinked, she vanished. She left the door open, not wide, just enough for wind to speak through. The curtain moved, but no footsteps followed. On the table, a wineglass still breathed her fingerprint, half finished, still warm. You call it abandonment. But the truth is worse. It was an invitation you never saw. The scent lingers, not of her perfume, but of what she withheld the storm that could have made you. Outside, somewhere in the dark, she laughs not cruelly, but like someone remembering a myth too wild to retell, the kind you were meant to become. And now the silence waits. Not for her, for the version of you that never arrived.